Hello everyone and welcome! In today's video, I'm building a 1/25th scale RC replica of the 1976 Ford Gran Torino from the show Starsky and Hutch. Yet another iconic TV show car that can frequently be seen sliding through the streets throughout the series. Maybe not the most agile car to ever appear on TV, but I do like these 1970s land yacht coupes, so this Torino will be a fun build. Using a plastic model kit body and one of our FFR SC1 chassis as a base, this car is decked out with lots of detail, including an interior and functional lights. There's lots to talk about with this project, so let's get started. I'm once again using a FFR SC1 chassis for this project, as I have with many prior builds. Its front motor, rear-wheel drive solid axle layout makes it great for an old-school American car like this. I'm also using one of our FC01 front suspension and steering assemblies, which places the steering servo up front and provides a solid double control arm front suspension. This chassis is fully 3D printable on a typical hobby FDM printer, and you could probably see some of the print lines on these parts. However, I have sprayed this chassis with some flat black paint, which although doesn't really hide the print lines, I do think it gives the chassis a better finish and overall look. Of course, it's hard to go wrong with a nice set of slotted mags on a car like this, especially the staggered look similar to what's seen on the real thing. The STL files and build tutorials for everything you see here can be found on our Patreon page. You'll find a link to that below in the description. Certainly check that out if you're interested in doing a similar build yourself. I've got the electronics installed, wired, and ready to go. Everything you see here is what's included in our FFR SC1 electronics kit linked in the description, except for the receiver, which is a Radiolink R6FG paired to a RC6GS transmitter. We don't sell the transmitters or receivers, but I have linked to a place where they can be ordered below in the description for your convenience. I shortened just about all of the wires and removed the on-off switch on the ESC just to keep things tidy and save some space. The advantage of building a bigger car like a 76 Gran Torino is there is tons of space for the electronics. You can see I just placed that R6FG receiver in the trunk. I'll have plenty of room on the right side for the battery, and all around easy model to RC conversion. For contrast, you can go back and look at that build I did a couple months ago with the kit replica. It's the same scale and I used the same chassis for that build, but an 82 Trans Am is a smaller car than a 76 Torino, plus there's no trunk on that Trans Am, just a big glass hatch. So although on paper two very similar builds, both 1/24 scale, both model to RC conversions, both having lights and shallow interiors, same chassis, but that kit build was way more of a challenge. Certainly something to think about when planning a build for yourself. Mid-size and full-size cars will certainly be easier, unless you don't really care at all about performance and use those super tiny electronics I showcased on that GT350 project. Those will fit basically anywhere on anything, just make sure you've got a steady hand while soldering. I don't have any footage of me assembling this particular chassis you see here, but if you'd like to see me building one of these FFR SC1 chassis step by step and learn more about it, check out some of the videos I've linked below in the description. With the RC chassis ready to go, I'm going to focus now on getting this body looking just as good. This is the Revell model kit I'm using for this build. I believe this is a relatively recent kit design, and it shows with great molded parts that fit very well as long as you're willing to take the time to do a little bit of trimming and sanding when required for the best fit. One thing I like is that since the body is molded in color, if the body gets scratched while driving, it won't look as bad since the plastic will be the same color as the paint. This kit includes all of the decals and other parts needed to make this car look like the one from the show. I have already created some body mounts using posts and rare earth magnets. You've seen me do this many times before on projects, and it's a great way to easily secure the body on the chassis while still making the body easily removable. I've also modified the interior so it can sit over top of the electronics below. The new floor was pretty thin and ended up warping quite a bit unfortunately, but regardless, once painted it should look pretty good. I will be installing some functional lights on this car, once again from Evan Designs. These will include headlights, taillights, and a flashing red light mounted on the dash. With all these parts ready to go, I'm ready to start getting this car put together. To get the body ready for paint, I started by cutting and sanding away any imperfections. The body comes very nicely molded, but there are a few areas that needed some work. Time spent removing these imperfections will result in a better looking car in the end. I also sanded the entire outer surface of the body to help with paint adhesion, and I deepened many of the panel gaps. There were just a few parts that I needed to glue onto the body at this stage. All the other parts, such as the chrome bumpers and grille, I only test fit. I want to make sure all of these parts will fit now before painting the body. At this point, the body is getting close to being ready for paint. However, before that happens, I need to make any necessary modifications to fit the lights. Starting with the flashing red light, I simply drilled a hole up through the bottom of the dash, large enough for the light to fit in. The transparent red piece included with the model kit can simply be placed over top. Both the taillights and headlights required some drilling as well, but overall it wasn't very hard to incorporate these tiny LEDs into the build. After the car is painted, I can simply use a bit of glue to secure each LED in place. So the car is now finally ready for paint, though not before thoroughly washing each part. The paint was a bit rough in some spots, so I wet sanded these sections with increasingly fine sandpaper to smooth it out. Next, it was time to apply the decals. Once again, Revell has provided some great quality decals that are easy to apply on the model. Quite important on this kit, as sometimes those large decals can be a bit of a challenge to apply. I also like how they included all of the little emblems and lettering. Way easier and better looking to apply the decals rather than painting those tiny emblems. I didn't quite get the section of the stripe that goes across the roof lined up perfectly, so it did result in a few wrinkles. However, I used some microsol solution to soften the wrinkles and press them down. It's not flawless by any means, but it looks good overall. After applying the decals, I used a silver Sharpie marker and a chrome pen to paint some of the smaller details like the door handles, window trim, and rocker panel trim. Here's how the body looks so far. I wanted to add some more depth and detail to the grille, which I did with a black wash. I just watered down some acrylic paint, brushed it on, and wiped it off of the raised sections. I guess the grille texture isn't very deep, so it wasn't as good of a result as I would have hoped, but I do think it will add to the overall look. To help protect the decals and paint, I applied the clear coat. I'll turn my attention now to the interior. Using a chrome pen and a silver colored pencil, I did my best to add some subtle detail throughout the interior. I also brushed some clear onto the seats to help give them a glossier look and a bit of texture. Just trying to add a bit more variety and detail to an otherwise pretty basic flat black interior piece. It won't be very visible in the finished car, but I think I've done enough here to make it look just a bit better. I also made sure to glue that tiny LED into place. At this point, the clear coat had dried. Once again, there were a few rough spots and imperfections, which I carefully polished out the best I could. It's not perfect, but it's better, and I didn't really want to dig too deep to completely eliminate these spots in case I just made it worse. Overall, it's nice and shiny, ready for the final assembly. It's time to get this car put together, starting with the bumpers and grille. Sometimes the paint can be just thick enough to require a little bit of scraping in some spots, but because I test fit everything before I painted the body, no worries about getting everything to fit. Next, I added the headlights. I made sure to use some clear drying glue for the lenses. I also like to use a black marker to color the outer edge. I feel like it just adds a touch more depth and detail to the lights. The rear panel went on next, and while I was waiting for the glue to dry on the lenses, I glued the side view mirrors into place. Some tiny parts, but thankfully they went in without any issues. Next, I installed all of the windows, which thankfully fit very well. It makes gluing them in place much easier when they are a tight fit and have alignment posts. Now, getting the interior installed was a little more of a hassle since I think the modifications I made resulted in it no longer fitting as well. I went kind of heavy on the glue, but thankfully it's solidly attached. I actually forgot to install the rear view mirror, so I had to sneak it in there with some tweezers, but no big deal. The body's looking good, but now it's time to install the lights. After messing with the scanner lights on kit, I wasn't too excited about messing with these tiny LEDs. However, these were far easier to add onto this model, simply using some glue and tape to keep everything in place and to make sure the wires don't get caught up on the chassis below. I secured the 3-volt battery and the switch to the underside of the interior. A pretty nice setup overall. I do like the look of these lights, particularly the headlights. Honestly, I'm not always a huge fan of functional lights on smaller scale builds like this, and sometimes I think it detracts rather than adds to the lifelike appearance of the vehicle. Sometimes they'll be way too bright, to the point of even shining right through the plastic body. It's still a cool feature, don't get me wrong, but I don't always feel like it makes the car look more like the real thing. Here though, I think the look is subtle enough. Those Pico LEDs aren't too bright and have a nice warm glow on the headlights. The taillights would look better if that light could be dispersed somehow, which is something I may look into for future projects, and maybe dim them down just a bit, but I think this setup here is pretty convincing. Just a few final details to add before this body is complete, those being the license plates and side view mirrors. It doesn't look like the kit includes a license plate holder for the front, so I simply cut a small piece of plastic that I can glue to the front bumper. And with those parts in place, the car is now complete. The car is complete, and what a fun build. This Revell model kit is great, well molded, easy to put together, and the finished result looks awesome. It's not built for speed, however it does drive very nice. A cool little replica of an iconic car, perfect for some small scale cruising. I hope you all enjoyed watching this project as much as I enjoyed building it. If you're interested in doing a similar build, be sure to check out the links below in the description. Also make sure you're subscribed to this channel, as I've got a few more build videos in the works, which will be making their way onto the channel in the coming weeks. As always, thank you all very much for watching, and I'll see you next time.